Welcome back once again for another chat about regifting. Today I'm going to talk about a time in my life when I was allowed special visitation from friends. To prepare for that visitation, I always wanted to look my best. But today I've chosen to regift to a special friend of mine who does a lot of public speaking. And I know that he always wants to look his best. Regifting, it's a very good thing.
Well, if you don't discover anything else today, you know that our video team needs a little more supervision. Man, it's good to see you. Glad that you're here. I'm Chris. I'm one of the pastors here at McKinney, and welcome. I'm sure I'm not the first place that you will have heard this, but Merry Christmas. It's great to be able to kick off our Christmas season with you, whether you're a guest or a longtime part of McKinney Church. We're glad that you're here. I want to ask you a question, kind of in line with the video here. Have you ever received a gift you were pretty sure when you got it was a regift? Like something so random or so useless to you that when you unwrapped the package, you were pretty sure that you weren't the original recipient of that gift that you just unwrapped. You got it from somebody who either didn't love you or didn't know you or didn't care about you, but they got it from somebody else and they decided that they would give it to you. You ever get a gift like that? Okay, now this is another, be honest, okay, loud and proud. How many of you here are regifters? Oh, come on now. Yeah, because I know about you. There are some of you that are here, you got whole closets in your house, right, that are filled with useless gifts that you got from other people that you didn't like when you got them, but you thought, you know what, rather than throw them away, I'll just put them in the closet. Because there's going to come a day when there's going to be a party, maybe a birthday party or a Christmas party, that I'll have to go to with people I don't like. And I'm going to have to take a gift. So I'll put it in the closet and we'll leave it there so that when it comes time for this gift that I have to give, I can just go to the closet and I can shop through all of the useless things that nobody ever wanted, right? There's a whole Seinfeld about this of people regifting label makers, right? And here's the deal with regifting. Usually it happens when there's a person in our life that we have to get a gift for. And we really don't care about them enough to have to go shopping or spend real money. And so we find stuff in our house that we think we don't have any use for. We didn't like when we got it, but maybe, just maybe, they'll like it. So we'll wrap it up and we'll give it to them with a smile on their face and maybe they won't know any different, right? Some of us are chronic regifters, but the problem with regifting is a lot of times when it happens like that, regifting is an insult, isn't it? Like to the person who originally gave you the gift, it's an insult because it shows you're not grateful for the thing that they got you. Or it's an insult to the person that you regift to because what you're really saying, even if they don't know it, is, you know, I could have gone shopping, like I could have put thought into this, I could have spent money, but I thought when I thought about what I would give you, you know what, here's some useless stuff that I got in my closet that maybe they'll take. And I can accomplish two things. I can unclutter my house, and I can be off the hook when it comes to the Christmas party, right? A lot of times it's an insult. So Jerry Seinfeld's right. If you're the person who's the recipient of a regift, you ought to be allowed to de-gift. Just take the person off your Christmas list because a lot of times regifting is an insult. But every once in a while, you receive a gift. And you realize instantly when you open it up that this is the kind of gift that so-and-so has wanted for their whole life, right? You unwrap a gift that is so priceless or so extravagant that instantly you want everybody that you know to have. This is the secret of what made Oprah Winfrey famous, isn't it? My favorite things, when she unwrapped it for the very first time, immediately she thought everybody on the planet needs this gift. And so the most giving, thoughtful, extravagant thing I can do is to regift this incredible gift to all of my friends. Well, when it comes to Christmas, what we're going to see over the next several weeks is that that's exactly the kind of gift God gave us when he gave us Christmas. It's a gift that the giver himself expected for us to receive with joy, for us to unwrap and realize its extravagance, to realize its cost, to realize what an incredible gift we've been given, and to think of other people when we unwrap it, and to recognize that the thing that we see lying in a manger wrapped in swaddling clothes is the very thing that the person who lives with you has always wanted. The very thing that the person who lives near you has been looking for their entire life. The very thing that the person who works in a cubicle next to you or goes to school with you needs more than anything else they could be given. And that when God gave the world a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger, God gave a gift that he intended to be regifted. See, isn't that a lot of your stories? You weren't Jesus people. I mean, you didn't really want to have anything to do with Jesus, or at least didn't see how he had anything to do with your life. Maybe at the worst, you saw Jesus as just a leader of a whole bunch of bigots. Jesus was a leader of a movement full of a whole bunch of people that just hated everybody, and you didn't want to follow that. You don't want to have anything to do with that. Or maybe you just saw him not hostile, but you saw him as just a guy. Maybe a really good teacher, maybe the leader of a religious movement that makes a whole lot of people behave and did some good in the world, but also did a whole lot of bad. And when you looked at Jesus and you saw who he was, you thought, you know what, maybe he's not bad, maybe he's not evil, maybe he's not wrong, maybe he's good, but I just don't have really any use for him. But then somebody entered into your life who'd received a gift, and they began to unpack that gift in front of you. They began to unwrap just a little of what they'd seen, a little bit of what they'd been given, and maybe slowly or maybe immediately you started to think, you know what? This makes sense. What you're talking about is what I've always wanted. What you're describing to me is what I've always needed, what I've been searching for my whole life. And in that moment and in that time, God allowed another person in your life to re-gift an extravagant gift that he'd given to them. Well, over the next several weeks, we're going to look at the gift that God gave us at Christmas. We're going to unpack it just a bit. And as we look at it and recognize the magnitude of the gift that God gave us and the gift that we've received, we're going to see that it puts us in a position to see those wants and those needs and those desires show up in the conversations we have with people that we love, so that we're poised to re-gift our gift by telling a story that the people that we love see everywhere they look. See, isn't it true at Christmas? Whether or not you follow Jesus, you can't get away from his story. It's on the radio on all of your favorite stations. It's set up in the yard of your neighbors. It's on the movies you watch at night on TV. It's in the newspaper. It's in the magazines you read. You can't get away from the story of Jesus. And what we're going to see over the next several weeks, as it turns out, I think we're going to see that the very thing so many of us have been searching for, the very thing that's highest on the list of so many of the people that we love, will spend the next month right under our nose. We're going to look at a promise. It's 2,700 years old. We're going to see how it relates to people like us, to friends like yours, as God promises an indescribable gift that he hopes you'll be willing to re-gift. If you got a Bible, and I hope you do, turn to Isaiah chapter 9. If you didn't bring a Bible today or you don't have a Bible, grab one that looks like mine. They're in those seats all around you. And we'd love for you to have this as a gift. If you don't own a Bible, or if the Bible that you own at home isn't in a translation that makes sense, we'll give you a head start today. We're going to be on page 479. That's where you'll find Isaiah chapter 9. This morning, what I want to do is try to set up this promise, to give us some context for what it is that God promised when he promised a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And then spend the next 4 weeks unwrapping a gift that's on everybody's list, even if it shows up in a package that you didn't expect. Isaiah chapter 9. Isaiah wrote about 740 BC, and he wrote to a nation called Judah. You may not be familiar with the nation of Israel's history, but you may be familiar with a person named Saul, who was the king, the very first king of Israel. And following Saul was a man that you're probably familiar with named David. He was a king that ruled for about 40 years, and after he ruled, gave the kingdom to his son, a man named Solomon. But after Solomon died, things didn't go so well for the kingdom of Israel. He left it to his 2 sons who couldn't really get along. And the kingdom divided into 2 kingdoms, a northern kingdom that kept the name Israel, and a southern kingdom called Judah. And both of those kingdoms lived in relative peace for about 200 years. Things seemed to go okay because there weren't a lot of nations around them that were a threat to them. The only real threat that they faced were each other, and they found ways to get along and coexist. And so they lived in relative peace for about 200 years. But about the time that Isaiah started writing, in 735 BC, a man took the throne in the nation of Assyria named Tiglath-Pileser. If you're looking for baby names and you want to name a boy, might I submit to you Tiglath? Be the only kid in his first grade class named Tiglath, right? Tiglath-Pileser III, and he takes the throne in Assyria. And all of a sudden, Assyria begins to become a huge nation. And the way that they become huge is that they swallow up all of the little nations around them. Well, the nation of Israel in the north begins to get afraid. And the king of Israel in the north turns to another nation, a nation named Aram or Syria. And he says to that king, you know what? Let's show Assyria how big and how powerful and how strong we are. Let's ally together. Let's show our strength. And let's get a lot of other small nations around to ally with us so that we can be protected from big, bad Assyria. And the king of Syria says, okay, sounds like a great idea. Israel says, I know we're going to have to make some concessions. I know we're probably going to have to follow some other gods, but that's okay. We've been following other gods for a really long time. So we'll just follow them. We'll make it work. We'll show Assyria. We'll protect ourselves and live to fight another day. And those 2 kings go to the king of Judah. And they say to the king of Judah, whose name is Ahaz, Ahaz, why don't you join with us? Because we can be your source of strength. We can be your source of protection. We can be your source of security. We can help you make it when big bad Assyria comes and tries to swallow you up. The king of Judah, Ahaz, he's not a good guy. In fact, if you want to read his story, you can read it in 2 Kings chapter 16. He's the kind of guy that follows gods other than the God of the Bible himself. In fact, he's a God that follows these other gods to the point he took his own son and sacrificed him on an altar to another god by fire. So this is not a good guy. And yet he looks at these 2 other kings and says, guys, let's just relax. Right? Maybe if we just leave them alone, they'll leave us alone and everything will be okay. Well, that makes Israel and Aram really angry. So they attack Judah. They attack King Ahaz, hoping to overthrow him and overthrow the nation and set up a puppet king that'll do whatever they want. And in the context of that battle, they kill 120,000 of Judah's soldiers. But they're not able to overthrow Ahaz. And yet Ahaz's power is diminished. And he realizes he's in trouble, so he goes to Tiglath-Pileser III, which is something like a mouse going to a cat to help him solve a dispute between 2 other mice. He goes to Tiglath-Pileser III and he says, hey, could you help me against Aram and Israel? Could you protect us? Could we become allies? Could you help me out? And Tiglath-Pileser says, sure, I'll take care of Israel. I'll take care of Syria. No problem. Of course, I'll take care of you on the way. And on his way to take care of these 2 other nations, he begins to turn on Judah, his ally. And King Ahaz is forced to take all of the treasury of the nation, to take all of the gold of the nation and to give it to to Tiglath-Pileser to buy off this enemy, which leaves this nation broke, politically vulnerable, surrounded on every side, and with a decimated army. And Ahaz looks around and he realizes God didn't show up like I thought he was going to. God had told me to trust him, and I said, you know, God, I'll trust you, but I'm going to hedge my bets, which really isn't trusting God at all, right? He'd said, I'll trust you, but I'm going to do things kind of my own way and hope you show up if I ever get to the point that I need you. And Ahaz becomes incredibly angry at God. And he turns the rest of the way away from God, and he closes up the temple. And he begins to find other gods that seem to be more powerful than Judah's God. And he sets up idols to them. But it wasn't just Ahaz. By the time Isaiah gets ready to write in Isaiah chapter 9, all of the nation is discouraged. They're at the end of the rope. They've lost hope too. They're at the end of their spiritual rope, their financial rope, their emotional rope. Their lives just, they weren't working out. They needed hope. His life wasn't turning out the way they thought it would. And they didn't know what to do. You ever felt like that? You ever been there? But God has a promise for these people at the end of their rope. He says explicitly in Isaiah chapter 7 and Isaiah chapter 8, Judah, you're not going to be able to cope. You're not going to be able to find hope in your financial situation. In fact, the financial situation is going to get worse. You'll be lucky if you've got one cow and a couple of sheep. You'll subsist on sour, hardened milk, curds, and honey. You can't find your hope in the finances. You can't find your hope in the political situation. The king's not going to be for you. The king's not going to believe in me. Don't find your hope there. Don't find your hope in the conventional wisdom that got you into this mess. See, what's going to happen, Judah, is people are going to give you advice on how to make your life better. They're going to give you counsel on how to make things fixed. And you're going to follow their advice, and it's not going to work out, and they're going to mock you. The very people that gave you the advice are going to mock you for keeping the advice that they gave. You can't trust in the wisdom that got you here. Your hope can't be found in economic prosperity or anywhere else. There is only one place that you can really find what you've been looking for. Look what God tells them, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 1. While you're expecting all of these things, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan. Now, this area that he's talking to, this specific area, was right on an international highway. It was a popular trade route. And so they bore the brunt of the pain when they were attacked, because they were easy to attack. They were easy to persecute. Not only that, this area that he's writing to was a melting pot. The people who lived there felt marginalized because the people who did follow God were in the minority. That they were disregarded. They were unheard. Nobody cared about their opinion, about God or about anything else. In fact, this term Galilee of the nations was a pejorative term. People who knew the God of the Bible felt like God didn't care anything for the nations. He primarily cared about his people. The nations, they were the savages. They were the godless people. They were the idolaters. To be from Galilee of the nations was a pejorative term, similar to the way that we use the term projects. Oh, you're from the projects? You're not even a real person. That's not even a real neighborhood. I mean, you're like a lab rat. You're just a project. And that's the way these people felt. These people were marginalized. They were persecuted. They were under attack. They were demoralized. They were hopeless. This was a group of people who at one point in their life felt like God favored them. God loved them. God protected them. God cared for them. But now they're not very sure that they're anything other than just a blip on his radar. To these people that wonder if God still exists, to these people who are at the end of their rope, to these people who wonder where the God of strength is, God promises a gift. And you see it beginning in verse 2, and God says it in the present tense, as if it's as good as done. Look at verse 2. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you. Underline joy and rejoice. As people rejoice, there it is, underline it again, at the harvest. As warriors rejoice, underline rejoice, when they divide the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them. The bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. God says, you're hopeless. I'm going to fix things. Just trust me. You feel like you're walking in darkness and you don't know which way to go? If that's you, listen up. God says, I'm going to turn on the lights. You feel like you're just a face in the crowd? You feel like you've been marginalized and nobody cares what you think? Nobody cares what you know? Nobody cares what you have to offer? I know it looks like, God says, that the people who follow me are decreasing, but here's my promise, it's as good as done. They're going to increase, and you'll rejoice. And there's going to be peace. Not just the absence of war, the presence of life, the way God created life to work, perfect shalom. Life's going to work. It's going to work out. Peace between you, peace between the nations, and God says peace between us. There's going to be peace. The gift everyone was looking for. And guess how he does it? How would you do it? Well, you'd have done it the same way the people would have done it, right? We would have looked for a strong, powerful military leader or a great politician, and we would have sent them to a prominent space where they could be seen and heard and felt. And everyone would know of their strength, and everyone would know who was in charge, and everyone would know who was in control. You would send them to Washington or to Beijing or to London, someplace where they'd be on CNN, and they'd be on Fox News, and they'd be on MSNBC, and everybody would be able to hear who they are and what they stand for and the direction things were going to go, and you would pick someone who could lay down the law and bring what you've always wanted, fix life. How does God do it? Look at verse 6. He says, "For unto us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders." This prophecy was read in front of all of the people. These people who were broken down, people who were hurting, people who were financially broke, people who were losing faith and losing confidence that if there was a God in heaven, he had anything to care about them. And God says, wait. I got this. I'm going to send a baby. And all God's people said, huh? A baby? A child? Maybe you don't understand the situation, God. Like, we're hurting here. We're broke here. We're surrounded here. We're marginalized here. Life doesn't work here, God. You're going to send a child? Haven't you ever heard? Don't send a child to do a man's work. Oh, but you and I know. When we look back at the passage with the benefit of hindsight, God isn't under-promising here. He says, unto us a child is born, but he says something else. It's more than a baby. Child is born, but when he's born, he's already a son. The son is given. See, God promises a child. He promises a human who would be born, but he doesn't become a son when he's born. He's already a son who is given to the world. He is both human and divine. Here's what God says. Here's the gift at Christmas. More than 700 years ahead of time, God promises that he's going to show up in flesh to help a world that can't fix its own problems. Here's the image. I've got 2 kids and a little daughter that's due any day. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, and from time to time, that 4-year-old and 2-year-old are in their room, and I begin to hear in the other room evidence of brokenness. And it usually starts over a train that both of them want to play with, but neither can figure out how the whole sharing thing works. And it starts pretty softly, just a little discussion that you only could hear if you leaned up against the door. But it progresses from whispers into crying out, into whining, into screaming, and then finally there's a smack, and it turns to crying. And as their dad sitting in the other room, at some point between whispering and crying, I will yell into their room, guys, figure it out. Did I mention they're 4 and 2? They're not going to figure it out. At some point, I'm going to have to show up in flesh. I'm going to have to be incarnate where they are in order to help 2 people who can't make life work make life work. Here's God's promise. In just a few simple words that you've heard choirs sing over and over, unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. Here's what God says to every single one of us. Whatever your brokenness is, whatever the reason is, whatever the problem is, whatever the circumstance is, whatever it is you're looking for, God did not just yell down from heaven to you, figure it out. He showed up in person so that you could rejoice. Did you see that in verse 3? In the presence of the gift, the people rejoice. Because he gave a child, because he gave a son. People for whom life hadn't worked out like they thought it should. People who wonder about the future and the future of their children. People who can't see the way forward and walk around in the darkness will find themselves rejoicing. Why? Because of a baby. But not just because of a baby. Because God himself was wrapped in swaddling clothes to intervene and to help life make sense. The passage goes on to tell us about the baby's characteristics. Second half of verse 6, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, everlasting Father. Prince of Peace. It doesn't just mean that he'll have 4 really weird names. This is how people will describe him. This is how people will identify him. This is how he'll be referred to by the people who know him best. When the child is born, when the son is given, the people who know him best will say, "Oh, that child, he's a wonderful counselor. He's a mighty God. He's an everlasting Father. He's a Prince of Peace." To the people who know him best, they'll realize, this is the gift I've been searching for my whole life. Isn't that what we find? That the gift that we always wanted might be in a package we didn't expect? That's what God invites us to remember as we look into the Christmas season and we look at the thing that he's given. Friends, the gift that you've always wanted, the gift that your family member has been searching for their whole life, the gift that the person that you know and you love and you work by and you walk by and you shop by, the thing that they've searched for their whole life may be in a package they never expected. Aren't all of us looking for something and help life make sense? Are we looking for direction in our life? During times when we feel like we're just bumping around in the dark? Are we looking for strength? Are we looking for stability and security? Are we looking for somebody to love us? To make sense of life? To fix what's broken? And to restore this world to what we feel like deep down inside of us things ought to be? Isn't that what our investments reflect that we're searching for? What our relationships reflect that we're searching for? See, the problem is we look for those things in all the wrong places. We go to all of the obvious places. We say we need direction, and so we turn to education and say, if we just had the right degree, well, I just went to the right school, if I could just figure out the right major, I could have direction for my life. If I could just figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Don't we look for strength and security in our job? In our positions and our status? Don't we say, if I could just reach that number in my bank account, I could have security? If I could just work that deal, we would be set. If I could just have that position, I could have strength. Don't we leverage our parenting so that we can have the strength that we always wanted and to exert power over somebody? Doesn't that reveal in us the thing that we've been searching for our whole life, but we look for it in the wrong places? Don't our relationships and the string of broken relationships through our lives reveal? We just want somebody to love us. We're just looking for a father. We're looking for a mommy who's not going to leave us this time, who's not going to leave us feeling unloved. And we have a string of broken relationships that show what we're searching for. Aren't we searching in government and in relationships and in our places where we live? Aren't we just searching for peace and for anyone who can bring it? The Bible says, look in the manger. Look at the baby. Because when God sent Jesus, he sent a wonderful counselor. That's what the people who know him best describe him as. You want strength? He sent a mighty God. You want to be loved? How about an everlasting Father? You want life to work like God created it to work? How do you feel about a Prince of Peace? But be careful. because the gift you always wanted might be in a package you didn't expect. God sent a gift that was meant to be regifted. Why? Why is it so important to regift? Well, you read through the passage. What happens when people receive the gift? Over and over and over, broken people, lost people, people who are walking in darkness begin to rejoice. Isn't that what you do when you unwrap the gift that you finally realize you see right in front of you and you've wanted it your whole life? God encourages us to regift the gift. Why? Because it's an extravagant gift. Not just to convert people, not just because we want a spiritual notch in our belt, not because we're trying to make people behave or just get them to show up at a church or to be more religious. God encourages us to re-gift the gift because where the gift is received, there is rejoicing. Re-gifting increases rejoicing. And isn't that what you want for the people that you know? That's not a bait and switch. That's not an ulterior motive. That's a reflection of love. To re-gift a gift that you know, when it's unwrapped, when it's received, will bring rejoicing to the person who receives it. Here's what I want to ask you to do. You've got some space there at the bottom of your bulletin. Would you write this? This Christmas, I'm praying that blank would rejoice. This is just for you. You're not going to have to turn this in. You're not going to have to show it to anybody else. Just right there on your bulletin, would you write this sentence? This Christmas, I'm praying that blank would rejoice. I'm praying that this Christmas, Dad would rejoice. That my son would rejoice. That the person who sits next to me at work would rejoice. That the person who lives next to me would rejoice. This Christmas, what I want is I want that person I love to be filled with joy. And would you begin to pray that over this season? Put it someplace where you'll see it. And as often as you see it, whenever you come back to it, pray, God, this Christmas, I'm praying that this person would rejoice. Not that this person would convert. Not that this person would start behaving. Not that this person would show up at church. We know all of that falls at the feet of a person who rejoices. So this Christmas, who are you praying would rejoice? Is it possible that God could use you as you examine the gift you've received to re-gift something that would bring somebody that you love incredible, unsurpassing joy? Over the next several weeks, we're going to unpack this list of how people who know him best describe the baby in the manger. And it's important for us to remember what God's given us, what he's promised us, what we've received. Because remembering the promise for us brings joy. But the hope is that it'll be on the front of our minds so that when, over the next several weeks, we realize the very thing God gave is at the top of the list of someone we love, we're able to step in. We're able to lean in. We're able to become the very best kind of regifter.